Everybody, welcome to Agent Talk. I am pumped to have Anshul Gupta, who is not your typical AI founder, just hyping some GPT wrapper. He was researching AI at Stanford when most founders were just trying to figure out what CRM stands for. And now Actively AI has just raised 22.5 million from Bain Capital and first round capital to welcome companies like Ramp, Ironclad, and Attentive to the new super intelligence in go to market. It's an incredible pleasure to have you here. And you have done all sorts of things, including calling BS on the AI revolution happening in sales. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's going on in sales and what is true and what is BS. Let's go.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Manny, for having me. Zooming out, I mean, why are we so interested and focused on this problem? I think it's such a huge one to solve, right? One of the things that we see is if you look at large companies, they're spending 30 to 40% of every dollar that they earn in sales and marketing, right? And actually only a small fraction of that is actually spent on tooling and technology, which from the outside looking in is maybe not obvious, right? The majority of that spend is on human beings, right?
Mm.
And what we've seen is human beings are tasked in sales and marketing with pretty complex data problems that they're relying upon heuristics to solve, and they're under optimized, right? And those are questions like, who are the best accounts to focus on? Who are the right people to target? When? What's the research? How can we sort of, execute on our multi-product motion, right, across the different segments? And the challenge is that sales reps, as you know, are only in seat for 12, 24 months on average. And so the coverage is pretty jumpy as a result, right? And your A player, you have the 80-20 problem. If there's only a couple A players, they could be moving up or onwards, right? And so how do you replicate that reasoning, that decision making, that depth that the A players have at scale, right, across your organization to optimize that 30 to 40 cents on every dollar that's coming in? That's like where we're really focused on, and sort of what we call go-to-market superintelligence as our proposed solution to a lot of those challenges or objectives that people are trying to solve.
So the super intelligence, does it come from your intelligence imbuing the go-to-market organization with that intelligence, or does it come from you looking at the top 20% of the reps and then putting that through the remaining 80%? Which is it both, or which one is it, and how does it work?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of a combination of both, which is like what we do is we train custom reasoning models to the nuances of every business. So like Ramp has their own actively reasoning model, Ironclad has their own actively reasoning model, and that's trained on the hyper specific nuances of their products, of their go-to-market motions, and as those continue to evolve, because companies like Ramp and Ironclad are pushing out new products, and just like you enable your reps on anything that changes, actively can be trained on that. But it's called super intelligence because it kind of has the two cheat codes, right? The first cheat code it has is that it's able to process way more data points than a human being can process, right? Like our prefrontal cortexes that are in charge of human reasoning are only so limited, and we can't process all these different data points. And then the second is sales reps and are limited to their sort of territory and their understanding of their territory, right? But actively is able to look at what's going on organizationally, right, and use that to optimize the recommended decision making. And then the third is it's always on and it's always improving, right? So unlike your best sales rep, as I mentioned, who could end up moving onwards, this is always on, it's always improving, and that's part of the reason why it's called actively. It's short for active learning, and so it continues to get better and better over time based off more data, based off real world outcomes, closed won, closed loss, and continues to drive the revenue lift and the rep productivity that you want to see.
So for those who are not using Actively right now, what have you gleaned from the top 20% of the reps that the remaining 80% of the reps are not doing? What are the top two, three things?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because when you look at the outside, from the outsider's perspective, if you look at like sort of what are the technology solutions in the market today to enhance sort of sales, you find that almost all of them are very volume based, right? So
Mm,
they purport to help you send out even more emails. So that's kind of
right.
AI SDRs. They purport to help you like do way more calls than you otherwise could do, right? Or they throw a bunch more signals at you and are like, hey, we can create all this complex logic of all these different signals that we can activate against. But when you sit down with the best reps, right, the top performers, the thing that we've noticed is they're not the ones actually doing the most volume, right? They're
Mm,
actually, if you look at the leaderboard, they're maybe on the side of doing even less volume, right?
mm.
In the bottom half of that, from an activity perspective, right? What we see is that they're incredibly targeted and laser focused in sort of conducting really deep research and hypothesis building and continuing to be on top of things over time. But they are limited to a certain set of kind of accounts or RAM or bandwidth that they can solve. And so what we're trying to do is, like I think what the amazing innovation that Outreach did was it let you sort of work. It scaled basically your account coverage, right? The accounts that you could touch via the sales engagement platform. And where actively comes in is like we're trying to scale the reasoning coverage. So the depth that you can apply to a given account, right? Like imagine one AE only had one account to focus on for a whole year. We're trying to scale that idea and that level of depth across your entire total addressable market. And that's what we think is replicating those A player behaviors at scale and actually taking them to an A plus, so to speak.
So are you making the 60% better, or are you making the 20% who's already top even topper? And which one has better results? You know what I mean? Because you have like, 26 in the middle, and so like another 20 here. Is it is a 60% in the middle even salvageable? Or is better time to spend on making your top performers even 10% better?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, our perspective is that we see lifts across the board, right? Because
Oh, interesting.
I think for it to be, I think for AI to be valuable and for it to be a true force multiplier, like you have to really win two things, right? First, you have to actually reduce the time being spent, right, as a function of like driving the inefficiencies, or sorry, reducing inefficiencies. And then the second is you have to actually outperform humans, right? What they can do on their own. And so that's where like we see the opportunity if you can land both of those facts, right, that you should see across the board improvements. Like I think even A players, right, even folks that are doing really well, they're still limited by just human capacity and bandwidth. And so how can you accelerate that?
So you have called personalization at scale laziness at scale. Break that down for us. Like why is that lazy, and what's the antidote to personalization?
Yes, it's a kind of common phrase that you hear personalization at scale as being what organizations are looking for. I just think it's gotten really corrupted because of these like volume optimizing solutions that have existed out there. I'll give you an example, right? I'm sure your inbox was like this last week too, because you guys just did your public launch just like we did. The amount of emails that I got saying, "Hey, Anshul, congrats on your recent funding round." Totally unrelated value proposition right after. Like some were like, "Oh, if you're constrained on capital, we can help you with debt or lending." I'm like, right after you said congrats on your fundraising round, right? And so the kind of stuff that is perpetuated, right, with the personalization at scale concept, I think is largely because there's all these like signal platforms out there right now that are like very much based off if then logic. So if someone raises a round of funding and it detects that, it'll automatically throw you to a sequence. Or if someone is on Paid's website, automatically throw them into a sequence, right? I don't think that is actually working anymore. And once again, going back to what the best human beings are doing and what can you scale is they just go incredibly deep, right, and try to do all available research. And so there were actually some really good emails, some really well researched emails that I got that also called out the fact that we have a fundraising, but then they had a hypothesis based off, maybe they looked at some of our job descriptions, or actually one of them had even talked to like one of my engineers before about challenges that we were facing. And so they were just much more sort of attuned to the things that I, as a founder of a scaling business, am likely to care about. And that is the sort of depth that is possible now to sort of replicate at scale. But we call that relevance at scale. It's not personalization at scale, because I think that fad is sort of past.
So what's going to happen to the AI SDR construct as a whole that is delivering personalization on scale in large heaps? And there's a ton of them. I like, dude, like I literally just talked to them, like 3 of them this morning. So what's the future?
Yeah, I think the running joke is every Y Combinator batch produces 15 new AI SDR companies. There's a lot of them. Like our view on AI SDRs is that there's maybe a market segment that they make sense for, but our focus specifically is on mid-market and enterprise organizations, and the complexity of their businesses, of their go-to-market motions, the reputation that the company has to uphold in the sales cycle. All of those are such that AI SDRs just empirically don't work. Now, if you're a company just starting up, right, you have no sales reps and you want to get meetings by hook or by crook, then I think that value proposition could be there, right? But fundamentally up market, and that's where a lot of our focus is built, right? And I can talk a little bit about the things that we've done to actually ensure that a product like ours works in very, very complex ecosystems and companies across different motions. Like that's where I don't think the AI SDR model works.
So you just raised a sizable round, so 22 and a half, and one of the busiest parts of the business world, right? Like in go-to-market AI tech. So for those founders out there, trying to make a go at it, like what is your advice for racing around in a busy, noisy world? Because I don't know that any part of the AI landscape is safe right now. So what would you advise to them do to stand out?
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious for your advice as well because I think you did an amazing job with sort of your fundraise. But for us, I think the thing that really helped us was having really solid customers who were able to speak about the value that we saw. So the way our fundraiser was really kicked off was we didn't necessarily go out and knock on the door of everyone on Sand Hill Road, but in many of the venture firms' portfolios, we had customers who were raving about the value that Actively was providing and sort of their experience working with us. And so I think having the true customer value, providing true ROI, and then having a compelling worldview about sort of why we are here to win, and what's different about our worldview than what's on with many of the players in the market, and in the world-class team right around that across our engineering and go-to-market function. Those are the elements that I think really helped. Curious if you think I'm missing anything there or things that were important for you guys.
No, I think that having customers who can speak on your behalf is the most powerful thing you can do. When you are fundraising, it's important that you find a partner that is aligned with your point of view and your hypotheses and your thesis. So one of the questions that I get that frustrates me sometimes, but I'm curious to hear your answer is when you get asked the question, what is your moat in your business? What's your answer? What was your answer on this last round?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the way we thought about it, and we did a lot of back channels as well. I think back channels always like whether you're hiring
Oh,
candidates or whoever
100%.
you're about to
Oh, yeah.
work with for the
Yeah,
long
yeah,
term,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
make a
Yeah.
huge difference. But for us, one of the things that we found really important is just like alignment on the vision and worldview. So rather than trying to change or shape your vision, right, they're aligned with that and all in on helping you sort of achieve that outcome. And so that was really important for us, and I'm sure it is for you guys when you were raising as well. The other thing, Manny, that I'll bring up is like Bain in particular has experience investing and backing winners in our space, right? So they were early in the journeys of companies like Clary, early in the journeys of companies like Gainsight, even Six Sense. And so I think just having that lens of the sort of the historical progression of the companies in the space, I'm sure they tried partnering with you as well. Having that lens of the progression in the space, I think is really important in alignment on the worldview. And they looked at all the players in the space and kind of had a hypothesis that aligned with our hypothesis.
Yeah, that's awesome. How so what is your take on people in AI at scale? You know, Actively did everything it could. Do you need as many reps to hit the same number if you increase productivity?
Yeah, if you increase productivity to hit the same exact number, you don't need as many reps. But I think that instead of constraining the number of people and increasing their productivity, you should increase the number, right? Increase the
Right.
number and figure out what are the right sort of resources, a combination of AI and people that you need. Because we know there's a concept we call like our team like the revenue frontier, like what is the maximum possible revenue a company could drive. And I think companies are nowhere near their revenue frontier, and go-to-market execution is like a huge contributor, or imperfect go-to-market execution is a huge contributor of that.
How will you paint the future revenue organization? Is there like an Actively specialist that is managing the Actively instance, or like Clay calls it a revenue engineer? Is that a thing? Does this whole go-to-market operations team get recut into an AI expert set, or how's that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say maybe go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. I'm listening.
Yeah. I would say it's a great question. I think there's like two things that I would say. One is because we work with enterprises and large companies, one of the things that we implement or deploy is what's called a forward deployed engineering model, right? So we act similar to Palantir and companies like, Decagon, Heavia, right? We're able to actually deploy engineers to help customize our platform modeling product to the nuances of their business, and that ensures that we can get really fast and continuous right time to value. The second thing I'll say, just like zooming back out from our perspective, like I think right now we're in this middle ground of like the way that people use AI is very much a co-pilot, right? Where like, think about how you and I interact with ChatGPT. We have a question that we want to go answer, and we go in, type it in, and we go back and forth with ChatGPT until we figure out what we want to get, right? I think the revenue orgs in 2 years, right, or just any business function in 2 years, that model is going to be flipped on its head, where there are going to be systems of intelligence that instead of the human beings asking them what to do, they'll be processing all that information, know the outcomes to optimize for, right, and actually guiding the humans where exactly to spend their time. And that's got to be like an A player, right? It's got to replicate the A player behaviors at scale. And like the people that have sort of the best system of intelligence, I think are going to have the biggest advantage. And that's sort of what we're aspiring to achieve. And I think that holds across, sales. I think that holds across marketing, customer support, any core business function. That's our belief in terms of the paradigm shift that's going to happen.
Any thoughts on you bringing knowledge from across your customer base to help? So for instance, if customer A wants to expand product lines, you don't have an A player that has sold the product line before, right? But you have the behavior of other A players that have sold across platforms. Is there any learnings that you're bringing across customers that gives you superpower?
Yeah, it's something that we're evaluating, right? Like you have to, without bringing customer data from company to company, right? Because that is something that like contractually or like philosophically we don't do. There's a couple areas that we're trying to experiment and explore with on how to help accelerate multi-product expansion or development without getting into too many details. I think like in terms of like why actively is different or unique, right? I know we touched a little bit on that and the impact that it has for organizations, right? Like what we're hyper focused on is increasing rep productivity, increasing the like amount of revenue and quality pipeline that each human being can generate. I think as a result of that, especially for larger companies, we spend a lot of time because there's a constant concern with AI of garbage in, garbage out, right? And like, oh, my data is super messy. How do you make it work? Like we spend a lot of time and effort and energy on really, really, really building something customized to the nuances of every business. And that is what I think is a huge reason why we're able to make the impact that we're able to do, which is driving win rates higher across companies, right? Driving rep attainment, like some companies are increasing the quota expectations as a result. And so we're just really obsessed with how can you actually leverage all the data information available and put humans in the positions to uniquely execute and spike and how you can continue improving that over time.
When you think about the competitive landscape out there, how do you worry about any incumbent, or do you worry about a new startup coming in disrupting you with something new and fresh?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like the short answer is like, I think the saying is be competitor. What I've noticed in this space, and I'm sure you saw it at Outreach, is there's like a very common, like people see something works and then other companies try to copycat it, right? And I'm sure like a
100%.
sequences, and all of a sudden they're called cadences, right? But same structure. So I think you know what I'm alluding to here. And even at the AI intelligence side, we're seeing more of that. Our perspective is you just have to continue staying really close to the customer, solving the problem, and continue pushing out new things because this is revenue maximization is an evergreen problem, right? You can always do better and better at it. And so how can you continue to really push the envelope and really be the first mover? And rather than look at what other people are doing and copy them, sort of do net new things. And I think that is like where our focus is. And within an organization, because the system continues to improve and improve over time, that helps us also drive some level of defensibility too.
That's awesome. All right, folks, there you have it. Anshul Gupta, actively go check it out. Go get a trial, go get it. And most importantly, do not do lazy personalization. Let's go for relevance. Thanks, Anshul. That was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.